Welcome to Let's Be Neighbors Beyond Protesting, Taking Effective Action, where we can learn strategies to get involved and build momentum for change within our communities, from talking to our city council to running for office. Tonight, we have two fantastic presenters. First, we are going to hear from Morgan Lyon-Cote, the co-director of the Legislative Action Committee with the League of Utah Women Voters. Next, we'll hear from Deborah Case, the co-director of the Legislative Action Committee with the League of, oh, I'm so sorry. I got those backwards. So sorry, that's my mistake. Morgan is the associate director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. And then we will hear from Deborah, the co-director of the Legislative Action Committee with the League of Utah Women Voters. I'm glad that you guys are going to introduce yourselves because I flopped out a little bit. So afterwards, as I said before, we're going to hear your questions. So please be sure to put those in the chat box if you guys have any questions. Just one more time, please feel free as well to type in how many people you are viewing from your device. So without further ado, let's begin. Turning it over to you, Morgan.
Thank you. So as Kendra said, my name is Morgan Lyon-Cote. I work at the Hinckley Institute of Politics, and I've been there for about 10 years. And I get to do lots of fun things there. I get to work with the interns. I get to teach classes. I get to help with some of our political analysis, our media, if any of you watch the Hinckley Report or listen to it as a podcast. So I get to do a lot of these fun things, and a big focus of the Hinckley Institute is political engagement. And we were founded by Robert H. Hinckley more than 50 years ago, and he had this vision that every student could be a politician. And we have expanded that really to be any person can be engaged in their community, can make an impact. And I love the topic of today, beyond protesting, because this is really what we do at the Hinckley. We teach people how to get engaged, how to get informed, and how to run for office. And actually, as Kendra was doing the introduction, I was reminded that if any of you are familiar with the Hinckley Institute or the University of Utah campus, we used to be in a very old building called Orson Spencer Hall, lovingly called OSH by students who went to it. It wasn't so lovingly thought of towards the end of its life. It was in bad shape, disrepair, and they tore it down. And as they were tearing it down, we were getting ready and cleaning things out. And I found these two old posters from the 1960s. And one of them, and I saved both of them. They were in the trash heap. I saved both of them. And one of them shows clearly like a hippie with a guitar and it doesn't have shoes on and is as voting, and just talks about, to have your voice heard, register, and then vote. And then the other one shows what looks like Woodstock, but at the time my brain was thinking about Occupy Wall Street and some of these other things. And the message of it is, to have your voice truly heard, you need to vote, you need to show up. We have to do things beyond protesting. And so this is something that's often on my mind. How can we truly engage in meaningful ways? Protesting can be so meaningful, but there's such a broad array of things that usually have to happen to truly move policy across the line. So what are some of these other tools in the tool belt that we need if we want to effect change? Before I get in too much to talking about some of these specific things, I also want to highlight, just so you can see my perspective, where I'm coming from, a couple of the programs that the Hinckley Institute runs. We are part of the Andrew Goodman Foundation, and this is an organization made in the honor of Andrew Goodman, who was killed registering Black voters in the South in the 1960s. His family started this organization to try to engage more youth voter turnout, to engage them more in the political process. And so we do this. We help students register to vote. We have other civic engagement activities. And beyond what we do to help students in that arena, we also have more of a community facing, always thinking about how can we increase voter turnout? How can we inform the public? And we do that through forums. We do that as part of the Utah Debate Commission, and other things. A new change with the Hinckley Institute is that Utah Women Run, formerly Real Women Run, is now at the Hinckley Institute, which we're very excited about. And Utah Women Run is a nonpartisan organization that seeks to provide the training and tools needed to become more engaged in the political process. There's lots of research beyond probably the many anecdotes that some of you may have, that women need to almost feel overqualified to get involved, to run for office, to hop into policy change. And so we try to provide some of those tools and encourage more women to get engaged. However, these trainings are open to everyone, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those things that we teach in just a moment. And then, of course, I hope some of you are familiar with the forums that the Hinckley Institute does, because this is another tool that we can use as we're trying to become more informed, trying to make a difference, learning about the issues. And you can come to campus, and we stream these as well, because this is another thing that we can do. All right, so in thinking about today's specific topic, beyond protest, two of the things that really came to mind for me in my conversations with the library were, we talked a little bit about petitions, and then we also talked about trying to make policy change. And one of the questions I often get are, are ballot initiatives, our petitions, do these really make a difference? And we've seen here in Utah, where we are not a very easy to qualify ballot initiative state. If you think about those states that have multiple initiatives on the ballot every couple years, you think of California, where citizens are voting on an array of issues. In Utah, it's pretty difficult to get on the ballot. Depending on voter turnout, you need, between 130 and 150,000 signatures, has to be distributed, have to hit these thresholds in 27 of the, or 26 of the 29 Senate districts. And so this is a really high bar. So what do we need if you want to get involved in these? There's currently a couple of these. There's currently a referendum about the new state flag that they're trying to get signatures to get that on the ballot so people can vote about that. And then there's been a ballot initiative that's being discussed for a couple years called Clean the Darn Air. I always laugh that is their title, but I love it because sometimes you have to get creative. Sometimes we are more formal and less formal with these names, right? But as probably some of you will remember, in 2018, we had 3 ballot initiatives and a question on the ballot. And this was not unique to Utah in 2018. States across the country saw this surge of initiatives. People wanted to vote on things. And as many of you will remember, 3 of these, there were actually 4 that got the signatures, including Count My Vote. 1 was disqualified. Count My Vote was disqualified because they had enough signature. Their opposition took enough signatures off. But the questions that I get often are, what do you need? How do you get involved, and what does it take to make these successful? And really, how to get involved is as simple as volunteer. First, signing if you agree with it, and second, volunteering to help their effort. Campaigns are always looking for volunteers. This is something I think that is true of every campaign. As someone who has worked with interns over the last 10 years, and many political campaigns, whether they're candidate focused or issue focused, they are always looking for engaged people who will help knock doors, who will help with strategy, who will help fundraise. If you want to get involved in a campaign, the door is usually very wide open. They are looking for people. And the things that it takes for these petitions to really succeed, never underestimate the power of good organization. Wars are won and lost on logistics and organization, and the same can be said for political campaigns, because it is a big lift to get these signatures, whether it's for that ballot initiative, whether it's for that referendum. And these organizations, we had Prop 2, medical marijuana, Prop 3 which was about Medicaid expansion, and Prop 4, which was about redistricting. And they were really capitalizing on the the moment, 2018, that first midterm in the Trump presidency, but also capitalizing on the growing popularity of their issues. The legislature had been discussing medical marijuana for multiple sessions, and people could see that it was getting closer and closer to passing. And the people behind the Utah Patients Coalition were not wanting to wait another 5 years or 10 years, however long they were thinking it might take for that issue to get the needed signatures and to get, or the needed votes and to get the governor's signature. And so they capitalized on this growing popularity and they got those signatures. But because, in addition to capitalizing on the sentiments, on the popularity, they were organized and they knew the system. And they knew that their opponents were starting to take off signatures, and they weren't taking off signatures, convincing people to remove their own signatures. I should be careful with my language. And they, they did what they needed to counter that effort. And it was very close. That was Prop 2 was the ballot initiative that passed with the widest margin. However, it came within just a hair of being disqualified. If they had lost 69 more signatures in Senate District 29, which is the western part of Washington County, down in the southwestern part of our state, and just 35 signatures in what was Senate District 22, which is in Davis County, they would have been disqualified. And so in addition to the support, the movement, all of these things, you also have to make sure you're organized and you know those rules of the game. I think another big thing that some of these groups have had is support from, they've identified, when we talk about, I think this can be like a business term or a gambling term when you talk about the whale, really that big supporter, and how can you use that to your advantage. And there were two really visible supporters. When it came to Count My Vote, they had the support of Gail Miller, and so they were able to set up those tables to get signatures in the movie theaters. And then with the referendum on tax reform in 2020, some of you may remember that right in December, the year before that general session, the legislature had met in a special session and passed a tax reform package that included increasing the sales tax on food, and it did a whole lot of other things. There was great discussion about income tax and tax on services and property tax, all these things, the state portions of all of these things, I should say. And people really did not like that tax on food was increasing. And a referendum was put into place, and they gathered 150,000 signatures in a matter of weeks, because in large part, that's really strong messaging. Hey, you don't want tax on your food. And second, they had the support of the grocery stores. And so when you walked into the grocery store and were thinking about how much am I spending today? Can I afford this? Many people have been in that situation where you're walking around the grocery store with your calculator, adding up things, tallying the total as you go, and telling people, hey, your grocery bill is about to get a little more expensive. Having that support from the grocery stores, especially the big focus was Harmon's, was really advantageous. So when you're thinking about those petitions, there's those things that you need to be aware of. The organization is so key, in addition to that strong messaging and that issue that people believe in. In addition to these making change through the petition, and I should also say, sometimes I hear people express frustration with that process because these ballot initiatives passed and the legislature quickly made changes to those laws. And I have people ask me, how could the legislature do that? And the answer is, these are laws like any other, and the legislature has every right to change, to amend laws like they do every other law. But what I often tell people is these are laws that may not have passed without these ballot initiatives. We may not have had that larger focus on the discussion of Medicaid, on how our state does redistricting. And when it comes to Medicaid marijuana, which we barely even talk about anymore. When the legislature is making changes to that, it's minor, it's tweaking, it's adjusting certain things. Um, whereas without that ballot initiative, this may still have been a large battle year in, year out as the legislature was debating these issues. The other thing I want to talk about, in addition to making change that way, is working through that how a bill becomes a law process, working to pass legislation to make policy change. And I'm not going to go through committees and bill sponsorship and all of those things. I just want to talk about some of these larger issues so you can conceptualize it. Because one of the things I often hear, as we talk about how can we get more people involved, how can we get people excited about being civically engaged, being part of the legislative process, is how do we just demystify this? How do we make people realize that this is more accessible than they are perhaps realizing? So when you're thinking about issues that you really care about, that you're passionate about, that you want to see maybe a policy change, or maybe you just want to be more involved in the process, feel like you're more involved in the process. Think about what you really care about, and do some research. What has already been done? What do you think still needs to be done? And one of the big questions, what is politically feasible? And I know that can be really hard in a state with a strong supermajority. And that doesn't matter if it's a Republican supermajority or a Democrat supermajority. It can seem almost impenetrable. But our legislature passed a record number of bills this session. So clearly, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of voices that break through. And there's so much nuance in policymaking in the law, and many legislators are so open to these conversations. And so think about what's politically feasible. You may not be able to start clear over with, your dream idea, but if you can make incremental steps to get there, or if you're okay with just messaging about how great your issue is, and being patient for people to come around, perhaps, there's lots of things that you can be doing. And the other question I would ask all of you is, what are you doing right now? Because I often see that people really underestimate how they're contributing to their community, to their cities, to their states. And what are your connections? Do you know who your city council people are, who your legislators are? Utah's, especially our House districts, they're not terribly big unless you're in a rural area of the state, and then geographically they're quite big. But often people can think like, oh yeah, that person is 3 or 4 streets over. I do run into that person at the grocery store. So you may have more connections than you are even realizing. And there are small steps you can also take during the legislative session. Every single day, I swear there's like multiple days on the Hill. There's Tech Day on the Hill. There's Rural Day on the Hill. There's Republican Women Day on the Hill. And this is where you get to go and sometimes shadow a legislator. You can sit in on their meetings. And again, it's just demystifying the process, right? Opening up those doors of the Capitol and making people realize that it's more accessible than perhaps they were realizing. So just some big overall things to think of as you're thinking about diving in, as we're thinking about what can we do beyond protesting. So timing. People love to reach out to their legislators during the session. And during the session is their interns reading their emails, and they are inundated with phone calls, texts, emails, and they can barely track, who says what. If obviously they're getting a huge amount of messaging about something, they're going to be paying attention to that. But really, if you want your voice to be heard, I've actually heard legislators say, send snail mail, like traditional mail, during the session, because they actually will say, oh my goodness, something came in the post, and look at that. But start reaching out to your legislators now. Well, maybe not right now because the session just ended. Give them a week, let them catch up on a little sleep. In a week or two, reach out about an issue that you are concerned about, so that they can start thinking about this. If this is something that they think warrants legislation or warrants a study, they can start doing this during the interim period, as they prepare for special sessions, as they prepare for next year's general session. Because this is really when they start formulating ideas, when they think about what type of bills they want to sponsor or have drafted. So now is really, now and in the summer is the time to reach out to your legislators, because even if you wait until October, November, December, things are getting finalized. They know the issues they want to focus on. So try to get in touch with them far ahead of the legislative session. If you have a really great idea, and maybe you know your legislator, maybe you don't know your legislator, but you can look them up on le.utah.gov, and send them an email. The number of stories, anecdotes there are about people saying, why did that legislator sponsor that legislation? It doesn't, it doesn't seem to be anything that's like unique about their district, unique about their career, their policy expertise, and the answer is usually a constituent reached out to them. So they really do listen to ideas that constituents bring to them. Our legislators have to be jacks of all trade because they deal with such a wide array of issues. So reach out to them, see if it's something they're willing to sponsor. Sometimes there can be, we can see a lot of success though about reaching out to someone who has the policy interest or policy expertise about the issue you care about. And again, you can look up committees and these sorts of things on the legislature's website, le.utah.gov, because I've seen people have success this way as well. And Representative or Senator Jennifer Plum is now in the legislature. She is a physician, and she was passing legislation even before she was in the legislature. And if you just Google her name, you can see some of the pictures of press conferences and other things. And it was interesting that she knew how to ally herself with people who cared about those issues that she was passionate about, and she wanted to see policy change. So beyond just contacting your own legislator, contacting someone you know really cares about a specific issue can be really successful as well. And I've seen Representative Steve Ellison, who has a large focus on mental health and suicide prevention in our state, people reaching out to him with policy ideas and policy changes, and some really meaningful legislation has passed that way. As you're figuring these things out and you're moving along, think about your messaging. When I talk to lobbyists, they often talk about those two big things that they try to use when they are trying to convince a legislator that the policy they want is just good policy and they should vote for it. And the things that they focus on are data and story. So lobbyists talking about, they have to have your history, you have to have your statistics to show why it's good policy. But you also have to have a compelling story. And if you don't have that, and if you're not prepared and you don't realize that a constituent with a really compelling story that might be really emotional is also going to testify in the same committee as you, I will talk to, these lobbyists, these hired guns that will say, oh man, that constituent engaging story can win. And I do know one lobbyist who says every time. I don't think it's every time, but it can win a lot. And I saw this really good policy and data and compelling story be used by the Policy Project these last two sessions. And this is a group of these originally 3 women, now 4 women, who are running the Policy Project. And that last year they formed the Period Project within that, and they were able to lobby to have period products provided for free in every K through 12 school in the state. And they so effectively used the data, talking about the number of girls who miss school, how this is so economically disadvantageous, how this contributes to poverty, and also use those compelling stories. And they also were really good at social media and events and some of these other fun things. And they used that data, they used that story. They also have been very smart about what legislators they reached out to sponsor their legislation. And they got that legislation through without one dissenting vote. And beyond that, the governor recently announced that we are now going to have free period products in every state building, and the institutions of higher ed have also committed to that as well. And this past year, they focused on teen centers in high school, and again, talking about those missed days of school, how kids can't study when they're hungry, just some of these other things. They were able to lobby and secured $18 million to ensure that these teen centers are available in high schools statewide, so that that really smart approaching those legislators they knew would be an ally, and then using the data and the really compelling stories. And they have been able to just have a lot of success in the policy arena with this. My last thing that I'll focus on as my time is winding down is the idea of patience. This is not something that we often talk about in politics, but things can take a long time. When I was studying for my master's degree, I learned about the theory of incrementalism, and this theory holds that most policy changes slowly and incrementally. And I have found through my own experience working in federal and state government, and also working in the nonpartisan world of policy think tanks, that this is largely how the vast majority of changes in policy happen, through these small incremental changes. And sometimes you have to be very patient with those. And even beyond those small changes, even those big changes, you have to have that patience. We can all think of things that seemed to have changed quickly, maybe even overnight, but sometimes that discounts the years of work and research and messaging that advocates of a policy were doing for sometimes years, sometimes decades. Our legislature recently passed the funding for our state to have optional full-day kindergarten, and this is something that was first proposed 2 decades ago. And people cheered last year when they passed it, but they didn't pass it with funding, and this year they did pass it with that funding. So sometimes it can take so long. We saw also this past session that our legislature passed Medicaid for an expansion of services for postpartum women, whether those women had live birth or stillborns or a miscarriage, providing an expansion of some of those services for those women. And again, this is something that was proposed for many years, and some people highlighted the fact that it was largely proposed by Democrats, and this year it was sponsored by a Republican. So sometimes you have to be patient with that process. Maybe you have to expand that idea of who your allies are or who your co-sponsor should be. But if you have that wider view, that long-term view, and you can be strategic with these steps, the possibilities can just expand even further. Congressman Chris Stewart was speaking to some University of Utah students recently when he was talking about the work he did for the suicide prevention hotline 988. And he highlighted the fact that this was universally popular, it had bipartisan support, and it still took years to get through Congress. And we can see that sometimes at the state level and the local level as well. So as you're thinking about these ways you want to get engaged, in addition to the messaging, the history, the strategy, the organization, sometimes that patience is very key as well. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Morgan. That was some great information. So let's go ahead and keep the momentum going. So we'll turn the time over to Deborah. Oh, you are muted, Deborah. Perfect. Thank you.
So sorry about that, Kendra. Thank you so much for having me here. Very excited to be here, and the topic, Beyond Protest, and how to get engaged. That is awesome. That is something that I was trying to figure out how to do a little bit better a few years ago myself. So my name is Deborah Case. I am with the League of Women's Voters, and I am one of their co-directors for the Legislative Action Corps. So the League of Women's Voters is a nonpartisan group. We've been together, we've been here for, 103 years. We just celebrated our 103rd anniversary. And we were formed after the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1920, about 6 months before the 19th Amendment was passed, giving women the right to vote. So that was about 72 years fighting for the right to vote. And then we've been around for 103 years. So we've been around for quite a while now. We basically have our positions. We're nonpartisan. We have our positions that we stand by, and that's what we stick to. So it doesn't matter to us whether whether we agree or oppose a bill. It doesn't matter if it's being run by a Republican or a Democrat. That's where we come up with our stance, is we go by our positions that we've had for a long period of time. So what I do is I'm a director of the Legislative Action Corps. So we really do, the majority of our work is going to be during that 7-week, 45-day fast and furious time of the general session here in Utah. Now, that doesn't mean we stop the rest of the year, but that is when our primary activity occurs. So we have a group of core people that go, and what we do is we watch those different committees and specific bills. And we all report back. Now, when we have something that we go, oh, goodness gracious, take a look at this bill, we either strongly, we oppose it, we watch it, or we support it. So when we see it coming to maybe be to a vote and we want to influence it, we'll call to action. So we are the Legislative Action Corps, and we will get all of our members, hopefully, to do something such as call their legislators and say how they feel about it. And we have been effective in influencing some of those votes, which is amazing. When it happens, trust me, the rush that you get is incredible. You think that you don't have the ability to do some of these things, that your vote doesn't mean a lot. But when you realize that you can actually take action and what you want to influence, it actually occurs. And you can actually see, oh my goodness, that bill that we fought against, it didn't pass. It was set to go through, but last minute, after everyone's, called their legislators, it did not pass. So it is an incredible feeling. And I know that there's a lot of disillusionment out there with voters, but change can happen and you can influence it. So that is one of the things that really drew me to the League of Women's Voters. When you talk about beyond protesting, I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with protesting, because there is not. But I felt like I wanted something more than that. And with the League of Women's Voters, one of the things that I learned how to do is how to reach out in the proper channels to make these things happen, how to influence them in the right way and legal ways in order to change things. So today, I think some of the things we're going to talk about are probably about your legislators, something about the interim session, advocacy, and city councils, because basically these are ways that we can have influence. Okay, so as I said, the fast and furious, that happens during that 45-day, 7-week time of the general session, and I'm still winding down from that. It's not quite over for me yet, at least. But what do you do the rest of the time? Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be doing with my group. And that's going to be, right now, we're going to kind of take a little break, and then we're going to start reaching out a little bit to our legislators. Now, as Morgan was saying, yeah, right now might not be the right time. You might want to wait a little bit, let them breathe a little bit. So I would suggest that. But that's one of the things we're going to start doing, is reaching out. Now, you can easily take a look, go to the le.utah.gov website and find your own legislators if you don't know who they are. They have an address search so that you can put in your own personal address and it'll pop up with your senator and your representative. So you can find out who they are very, very easily. And one of the things that's really key is to get to know your legislator. I have a hard time with that word. not during the legislative session. It's just too busy. So right now is the perfect time, well, a couple weeks from now, is the perfect time to start reaching out to your legislators. One of the things that we're talking about doing is finding your legislator and finding something that you agree on with them. So perhaps you don't necessarily like, maybe you didn't vote for them, but the best thing is, hey, why don't you try finding a bill that they voted on that you agreed with, so that you can approach them with something like, hey, I really appreciated the fact that you voted for this bill. I really supported that, and I was glad to see that that's how you voted. Those are things that you can do. You got to remember that your legislators, they're people just like you. I mean, I will tell you that there are some legislators out there that are just so brilliant. It's amazing. They're not human. But most of them still, they go home and they eat dinner at the table or in their, right beside their kitchen, just like everybody else, and they're normal people. So, you know, getting to know them isn't really as difficult as it seems. So we suggest reaching out to them and getting to know them during the off time. Some of the things that, you know, you can do also is, you know, let them know something that you support about them, but also kind of like what Morgan was saying, you don't have to necessarily have a huge backstory to it, but you can start to tell them some things that are important to you. What is concerning to you and why? That helps a lot for them to understand why it is important to you. Sometimes it's hard for us to see when in somebody else's shoes why something is important. For example, one of my representatives, Representative Galen Benyon, she was teaching refugees English. And one of her students came over to her and started explaining why it was difficult for them to go to the DMV and that they were having a hard time getting a license to drive, to go to work, or to take these English speaking classes. And so one of the bills wound up being that she ran last year and this year again, is to get translation for the DMV test. And so that is an amazing way of, hey, just reaching out to your legislator and giving a real story and letting them know why this is important. And with that, just one of her students, not even a constituent, talked to her about it, and she ran that bill. So those things are really, really important. Let's see. Another thing you can do is call, text. I think Morgan said snail mail. Hey, if it works, that's a great way to do it. If you have the ability to text them, that's often one of the best ways to do it during the legislative session, because they are so overwhelmed, and just with modern technology, that's what more people are doing. But like if Morgan says that, I think I might be trying that. That's another thing that we're thinking of doing, is doing some snail mail as well to try and reach them. There's so many different points of contact that you can make. It's not that there's one specific way only that works, but try and reach out and get to know them. That way, when you approach them later on during like the general session, when things are fast or furious, they're going to know who you are. And they're going to have an opinion whether they trust you or not. And if you come to them and you say something, they're more likely going to listen. Okay, so that is a great way to use this off time. The other thing right now, and we're going to go over your legislators, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be going into interim session. All right, there's going to be committees, like a lot like the standing committees that they have during general session, but during interim, they're a little bit different. And one of the things that makes it easier for us here at home is pretty much interim session only meets once a month. So you don't have to be, it's not that fast and furious. It's not that every day. It's not that constant boom, boom, boom. So you can actually go, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take one day this month and go down there, or watch it at home, you know, virtually, and participate and get to know what's going on. One of the things that you're going to start to know is they're going to bring up some of the bills, or some of the topics, I should say, that are going to be important. You're going to see the hot topics. You're going to see them developing. You're going to have a better idea of what's going to be coming down the pipeline for next general session. You'll have a lot more backstory of what's going on and a deeper understanding. Okay. And I also wanted to see, oh yeah. So when you're dealing with interim session pretty much runs from April through to November. And those meetings are going to be about once a month typically. All right, so the bill folders for people, they tend to start in May. So that's when the legislators start opening their files for bills for the next year. But most of those don't really come out until like the middle of December. So what you're really listening to is the creation of ideas and the topics of what they're working on and what's coming out. But you're really not going to be seeing a lot of it until like December of the next year. So that gives you a lot of prep time. So if you also want to take a look and get familiar with the processes, you can go to the Capitol during the interim session, get familiar with the Capitol. So it can be a little bit overwhelming. During the general session, I know that many of us that have been there before have gotten lost and gotten in the wrong spots. So you can get there, be more familiar, and even kind of run into some of the people there in a much less stressful environment. Okay. All right. All right. So let's see. Yeah, let's go on to advocacy groups. Now, advocacy groups, one of the things like, what we're talking about right now is independently going out and approaching your legislator, or independently going to the Capitol and going to interim committees or watching it virtually. But you don't need to reinvent the entire wheel, okay? There are advocacy groups out there that are doing this, and you can do it with other people. It's less overwhelming, and it gives you a little bit of a social outlet. Like I'm with the League of Women's Voters. It is amazing to be able to talk with some of these brilliant women who have like the same interests as I do, and they can add more insight into things. And it's fun to go, believe it or not, yes it is, it's fun to go do these things together, to go sit and watch them do floor debates with a group of friends, and then we can discuss it. So it is really fun. So with advocacy groups, what I would say is, hey, you know what, find your passion, take a look, see what it is that you're interested in. Because you know what? You can pretty much guarantee there's probably already an advocacy group that's into that. So you can go ahead and look online if you want. One of the ways you can do that is just simply type in advocacy groups in Utah, and you'll see certain things pop up. You'll see things for civil rights. You'll see things for animals. So if you're interested in a particular genre, you can go ahead and find an advocacy group that is already doing that, and you can join them. It makes it a lot easier and sometimes more fun. If you're not really sure what your passion is, that's where going and following these committees during intern session or during general session is really a great idea, because they have a whole list of it: transportation, judiciary, education. You might not even know which one you like. Like, for example, I went and sat into a transportation committee. I had no idea I would find transportation utterly fascinating. Okay, I thought it was going to be completely boring. It was not, at least to me, it was not. It might be to others. But think of it like taking a look at when you went to college, for example, and you took these classes for, your general education breadth that you thought were completely ridiculous. But it really opened up your eyes. Maybe you didn't know that you liked underwater basket weaving, but you took a class and you realized you did. Kind of like I watched a transportation committee and I realized I was fascinated by transportation. So you never really know. So if you don't know your passion, go ahead and try a couple different things. Go and watch the different committees. And in the different committees, it may say, like during general session, it may say that, hey, this is transportation, but different bills wind up in there. So you'll wind up getting a different taste of a lot of different things. So it can be quite exciting. It can be quite exciting. Now, so that's advocacy groups. And another thing that you can do is go to your local city council. Now, why is that important? Well, when you're dealing with like how to get involved civically, well, a lot of what we're talking about is at the Capitol. But you know what? When they make those bills, that trickles down to what your city can do. So there are certain things that your city may want to do, but they are restricted or, by the rules that have been passed down from the Capitol, from the legislature. So I can pretty much guarantee at your city level, they're going to have lobbyists that are going to the legislature to try and influence certain rules in certain bills in their favor, okay? Because those bills do affect you at the city. But it is a great way to get involved locally and see what is important, because that, for example, might be your passion when you realize that, hey, this is what you wanted to do in your city. You wanted to do something, but you can't because of this law. Well, maybe that's your new passion, is how to change that law. So you never really exactly know. So for me, that was a lot of how I got involved in politics. Was I had been renting in different places in the Salt Lake Valley, and I had purchased a home and decided I really wanted to get more involved in the city that I lived in. So I decided to go to City Hall. And when I did, I met other like-minded people, and I learned a lot about what was going on in my city. I found out things that I was completely shocked about, like a building development that was right next to me in my own district that I had no idea about. And in that, met other people at City Hall, and we created an organization, started a petition to fight that. So it's it can definitely snowball into things. And from that, from the petition there that we had, that went into a couple different things and wound up with me actually running for city council in 2019. I wound up winning the primary, but I did not win the final election. But it was an incredible experience, and the people that I met were amazing, and I got to know a much better feel of what it was people in my city wanted and what the difficulties that they were experiencing. So the learning was amazing. Um, from there, I wound up actually being asked by my representative, Galen Benyon, to run her campaign for House. And so I helped her with that, got to know her very well. And of course, she was running at the same time as our Senator, Senator Rebay, so I got to know her very well. So that helped me in getting to know both of my legislators very well. And like Morgan said, one of the best ways you can do is to volunteer. There are always people looking for volunteers. So for example, those people that helped out Representative Benyon with her campaign, well, of course, they had her ear because they were out there working with her every day, helping her. So they wind up with a better relationship with her. And when something comes up that they want or they think is a good idea to have a bill for, they have a very easy access to her because they have developed that relationship. So like when Morgan was saying that you can volunteer, it is definitely a worthwhile way to go. People are always looking for it, and you will wind up meeting other people and getting more influence. So you'll get more knowledge, more influence, and start meeting other people who have influence. It is just a wonderful way of doing things. You never know exactly where it'll go. So after I did the campaign for Galen Benyon in 2022, that's when the League of Women's Voters approached me and asked me if I would be their Legislative Action Corps co-director. So that's how things can snowball. So how does it work? I decided to go to a city hall meeting, and now I wind up at the Capitol. So you never really know exactly where it's going to lead you, but you can start with your passion, or you can find your passion along the way. So there are several different ways. So those are a couple different ideas of how to get involved. And a lot of it is just start taking a few small steps, like reaching out. People are human, reach out to your legislators. Go to some interim committees, okay? Get familiar with what's going on in your local city. Okay, you don't have to do these things all on your own. You can join a group, an advocacy group, and you can have them help you along these ways. So there are tons of different things that you can do during the off season. And definitely, you can find so many different areas to volunteer. You can help register people to vote. There, you can do so many different things. So I'm going to close up with that, and I'm hoping that maybe we'll get some more questions and I can help answer any of those. All right. Thank you very much, Kendra.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That was some amazing information. Yes, as you see, we've had some questions come in and we have a couple more. So I'm going to just start with the first one. Most of these came in after Morgan's presentation, so I'm assuming the majority of them are for Morgan. However, I would love any information from either of you. If you have any thoughts on these questions, I'm sure everyone would love to hear from both of you on any of them. So the first question comes from someone who said that they have been taking a course about how to write a professional business letter. What they're learning is to keep it to a page. Is that correct? Do you believe that that it should just be a page? In your experience, is that correct? Morgan or Deborah?
Yeah, just business letter to anyone.
Yeah, professional business letter. I assume they mean in writing into their
yeah.
I don't know.
I would agree with that, whether it's an email or a cover letter or anything like that. Usually if you're sending something to a very busy person, it needs to be something that they can read quickly, that they can digest quickly. And so if you just have a few well-organized paragraphs that are well written and well edited, the more likely it is to be read.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. If you're writing to, for example, your legislator, if you are a constituent, we definitely suggest putting constituent in the subject line of like an email so that they know, because it definitely makes a difference to them. And if they're going to be going through their emails, you want them to be able to search by topic easily. So definitely right there in that, in your subject line, put what it's about, like, if it's about a certain bill, a certain topic, so that they can look at it, because it's going to be hard to find it once they passed it by. But keeping it short and to the point, make sure that you make your point. You don't want to go on forever. You want to make sure that they know what it is you want and what action you want to be taken. So at the end, make sure you tell them what it is that you want them to do. So that's my advice.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think that absolutely answered the question. That's wonderful. So next one that I have, what is the best way to find a grassroots movement if someone wants to volunteer? Do you find them on social media? Are there other websites?
Like that's what I would do is start off just by doing a search online, Google, because there are advocacy groups and you can look for nonprofits. And if you have a particular idea, type it in. You will find that they will start popping up. And you can also just go to one that you know and start asking people, because people that are in these groups know of other groups as well.
All right.
Very well said. I don't have anything to add.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next one, how do you, take part in this process without money and connections? And do you have any ideas for fundraising to be able to have that money?
Yeah, I mean, what I said during my presentation is sometimes people have more connections than you realize. And even just, as Deborah was saying, if you reach out to your legislator now or your city council person, you're more likely to be able to forge a new connection. It's always easier to rely on a network you may already have. So again, look at your neighbors, look at those people in your life, perhaps those professional business associates, people maybe have done, one of the dads on my kids' soccer team, he did a legislative internship 20 years ago. And when his company needs help with the legislative session, they rely on him because that knowledge he secured during the legislative session, the players have changed, but the process has not. How a bill becomes a law, committees, all of that is still the same. So look at those connections, those experiences of the people that you know. And again, if you don't, go to le.utah.gov. I put the link in the chat. and start reaching out to your legislators. You can search by name, or you can search even by address or district, so you can find out who represents you and start making those connections.
Mhm. And making those connections, that's absolutely free. There's no charge for that to send an email, and there's no charge for you to volunteer. There's no charge for you to be an intern. So those things are things that you don't have to pay for.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think this next question is very timely since you mentioned this. But how does a bill become a law? And I'm sure an entire course could be taught on that, but kind of this
You
is
know,
a
what
quick
is
version.
funny is that Schoolhouse Rock from, I don't know, was that the 70s or 80s? The process is still basically the same. Someone here in Utah, someone from legislative research writes legislation, but they do so at the direction of a legislator. And then it gets assigned a committee, and or it goes to the rules committee, and they decide what committee to send it to. And that committee has to say, yes, we want to send this to the House, and then the House votes on it, and the Senate votes on it. And if everybody agrees, then the governor signs. And of course, that is a vast oversimplification, but that sort of step A, B, C, D, E, F, G is basically the same in every state house throughout the United States. It's a lot more complicated. There's more players, there's advocacy groups, there's lobbyists, there's all these things. But also, if you go to le.utah.gov, oh, someone put it in there. Was that you, Kendra? I love it. You can go and look at the bills that were considered last session. And if you click on that and then click on a bill, and you can see there's a little tab that says status, you can go and you can sort of chart the path of that legislation. You can see what committee it was assigned to and what the vote was of whether it passed committee or not. And you can see the vote on the House floor and on the Senate floor. So sometimes going to the legislature's website can really clarify what the process is as well.
Wonderful, and thank you for that link, Kara. I know I'll definitely be watching that later and take a trip down memory road. Deborah, did you have anything to add on this specific question?
No, I think she's absolutely right. I was just looking because I think that somewhere on the legislative website, I think that there is something that describes that as well. But I was just looking right now to see the link, but I didn't see it in that short time frame. But I think it is there. But it is very, very confusing sometimes. So it does help to have somebody that knows a little bit about it to help you.
Great, thank you. And then I think, Morgan, I think you addressed this a little bit already in your previous answer, but how do we find out who our legislative representatives are?
Yeah, again, you just going to le.utah.gov, and there's a tab that says legislators, and you can search by your district, or you can look up their names as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, and I think this is in response again to Morgan. So how can signatures get taken off from the opposing side?
Yeah, so this is, and I'm just putting in the piece of code right there if anyone's curious. So this is allowed in Utah. We have our signature gathering time period, and then the opposition has the opportunity to look at the signatures, and every signature has to be verified. And while they're doing this, they can go to people and say, hey, I know you signed that, but did you know that the bill will also do this and this and this, and do you really agree with that? And they can give people, maybe provide a little more information or give people pause, and people can then say, oh, I'm no longer comfortable with this. I want my signature removed. And so some of these opposition groups are pretty good at it. And we saw one ballot initiative be disqualified in 2018, and we again with Proposition 2 about medical marijuana was almost disqualified because of that really targeted attempt to have those signatures removed.
Great, thank you. And anything to add on that, Deborah?
Oh, I think she's absolutely right on
Great.
that, and it can be very devastating when you're trying to have a petition and you think you have a certain amount of numbers, and they come at you and they can take those numbers away. So it can be a brutal battle. It definitely can.
Wow, That's good to know. And then we're coming into the last question that I have. So just a reminder to everyone who's watching, if you have any questions, please put them in that chat box. We'd love to hear from you. This is a community program. We want to hear from our community. So if you have any further questions, please get them in. And we will go to our last question, which I really do think is very, very similar to our previous question. So it says, where can I read about the rules of the game, referring to District 22 couldn't lose 36 signatures from your example?
Yeah, I put that link in there. But honestly, so technically you'd think I'd know like the fancy way to look these things up. But when I need to verify something, when we're getting ready to record the Hinckley report or do something like that, and we say, wait, let's hurry, make sure we know what the rules are. I usually just Google signature requirements Utah and try to make sure I verify. So again, Utah's website, I think our state government's website is actually really great. And it's actually won awards because of how easy it is to navigate and find bills, find legislation, find code, especially compared to other states. So luckily, our state makes it pretty easy to find these types of things.
Wonderful. Great, thank you. So it doesn't look like we've had any other questions come in. Again, you still have time. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat box. But I'm just going to open up the floor to both of you if anyone has any final thoughts, points that they'd like to share.
Just want to thank you so much for having us here. This has been really, really fun, really great. I hope we do get a few more questions.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. It's always exciting when people want to get more engaged and want to learn.
Wonderful. It looks like we don't have any more questions. We just have some great feedback. Everyone saying, please, let's do this again. These webinars are so helpful and informative. Thank you so much. So thank you so much to both of you. I really appreciate your time this evening. I think this was a great webinar, and I think we've gotten some really wonderful information this evening. So thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very, very busy schedule to be connected as a community to discuss these issues that affect all of us. So I hope everyone has a wonderful night.